Our story begins with a group of men walking. They are part of a tribe. In the final part of the plan, you can see that they carry a young man trapped inside a barrel tied, who wonders what is going on. As they continue the journey of the clan of men, they implore the name of their goddess, Mitama. After their long journey, they reach the end of the cliff where one of the subjects indicates to the chief that they have brought the successor. He replies that they have done a good job and also tells them that now his son, Yukito Urabe, will begin with the Musubai ritual. Then there is a kind of pause in which the main character, Yukito Urabe, explains that his father is the founder of this sect, and that is why he has suffered many things since he was a child. After that, the father continues explaining to the clan that his son will be thrown into the water. After that, he will defeat death, returning as the new leader of the sect. But Yukito, despite his efforts, tries to make his father reason. But despite his efforts, it turns out to be totally useless. His father, on the other hand, asks the goddess Mitama for her blessing, then goes to his son and tells him not to be afraid, that the goddess Mitama will really save him, reminding him that he should also pray to Mitama to save him, because if he really believes in the goddess, then she will save him. Then Yukito is thrown into the ocean. While he is screaming, plunging into the depths, while having a kind of flashback of his life, but he remains slowly falling deeper and regrets his life, so he thinks of sending the demon to the goddess Mitama, as he believes it is a waste of time. However, before fainting, he thinks that if this powerful goddess really exists, then she should revive him in a world without gods or religions, because that way, he will be able to have friends and a normal life. Moments later, we see him waking up later, naked while being caressed by a beautiful girl. Minutes later, we see them in a village, and she tells him that she will take care of him until he is completely well. She tells him that she works in a restaurant and her name is Allurl. She also tells him that whenever he wants, he can eat there for free. Little by little, she realizes that she has been reborn in another world. He asks her some questions and she only interprets that he wants to work in the village. Therefore, she tells him to accompany her, although he still thinks he is in a world with characters that use swords and spells. Minutes later, we see him in a field plowing the land with other people, while he thinks it was not what he had thought. But seconds later, a young man approaches him with an intimidating attitude and asks him if he is the person that Allurl had saved. And with a threatening tone, he tells him that all the women in the village belong to him. But suddenly he is interrupted by another young man, who apologizes to Yukito, introducing himself as Klen, and the intimidating young man as Roy. And when the Klen introduces himself, he tells Yukito that he has a job for him. The first thing he must do is to hold a small dagger. Yukito thinks that the mission is to attack some kind of creature, but in fact it is for him to cut some grapes from the harvest. Thinking that it is part of an initiation process, Yukito makes an excellent use of the dagger, cutting grapes. But in fact he cuts too much, obtaining in excess, exceeding the daily harvest. In another scene inside a tavern, we observe a few people drinking alcohol. We also see that Allurl tells her older sister Silurl to help her and stop drinking. Days later, we see that Yukito is plowing the land, when suddenly he hears someone shouting for them to run, and then a creature appears. Roy tells him that he will take care of it, but later we see that they ran away to another place, managing to escape. Once safely in the other place, Yukito questions Roy, telling him that they should feel ashamed for only having run away, and that they should have fought against the beast. Then he asks him what is that book he had read before running away, and Roy answers him that it is the Guide of Strange Monsters, in which he gives him answers to the things he should do. As the days go by, Yukito realizes that the world he imagined is not as he thought it would be, and that it is in fact very basic, but not bad. Besides knowing that they don't have magic, they don't know about religion, gods, or anything spiritual. Days later, we see that Allurl, Roy, and Yukito have arrived in the imperial capital, and it is the first time that Yukito is there. Roy advises Yukito not to talk to the people of the city. After that, we see them arrive at a kind of gloomy bookstore where he finds a famous erotic book, which leaves Roy and Allurl surprised, but does not cause surprise in Yukito. Later, the three of them arrive at a square where a kind of execution is taking place. Some young people ingest something that poisons them. This stuns Yukito, but Allurl holds him by his arm, pulling him out of there and explaining that his country has a system to end people's lives. This startles Yukito, who can't believe that this is happening. Later at night, Yukito is sleeping in his room, but Allurl lies down on his bed, and after she wants to get intimate with him because of what she read in his book, finally Yukito manages to persuade her. Then she explains to him that to that village, they send the outcasts, that it is an isolation village, where they put a mark before them, and the people who do not follow the rules are sent there. Allurl tells him that she is happy that he is there, because he does not treat them differently. He is also happy to be there. Later that night we see Silleril sad. He talks to Clen and Roy that the time has come. And then, Roy is beaten and Yukito finds him. Roy tells him that they have taken the girls. Suddenly Clen appears telling Yukito that they can reach them. Later we see that Silleril is in the place of the sacrificed dead, and one of the executioners tells Silleril that she must accept her end. But fortunately Clen and Yukito appear, and he tries to save her, but in spite of his efforts, the leader of the guards stabs Yukito with his sword, then kills Silleril in front of his eyes. About to die again, Yukito remembers the words of his father that Mitama will save him, but Yukito thinks that the rest of the people are the ones that really must be saved, and holding the necklace that his father had given him, he begs the goddess for her help. Suddenly, a miracle happens and a goddess appears, who upon seeing the state in which Yukito is seriously wounded, then unleashes her fury against the soldiers, disappearing them from the place. Then she heals Yukito, Silleril and Silleril. After that she introduces herself telling them that she is Mitama. Little by little all the people who had died together with Silleril revive, while Mitama says that he was not planning to revive anyone else besides Yukito. But it turns out that he has more than enough power, but the rest of the people in the city leave the place, and that intrigues Yukito. Hours later Yukito returns to the village in the company of Silleril and Silleril, and that makes the rest of the people there happy, and they decide to celebrate. While this happens, Yukito is a little worried about everything that happened in the capital, and he doesn't know how he will protect the village in case there is any consequence for what happened. But he is interrupted from his thoughts by Roy, who asks him why he has that worried look on his face. Meanwhile, in the upper rooms of the restaurant, Silleril tries to put some clothes on Mitama goddess, who is naked. Silleril asks her if she has some kind of relationship with Yukito, but she only answers that she is his goddess. Then Silleril asks why she likes Yukito, but Silleril interrupts telling Mitama that her sister is in love with Yukito. Silleril feels a little embarrassed, but Mitama approaches her and tells her that she is very happy that there are people who like Yukito. Back at the tavern, Yukito asks Clen to explain a little more about what the end of life consists of and why someone is forced to end his own existence. Then Clen answers that the Emperor and the Parliament devised that system centuries ago. Suddenly Mitama arrives, jumping on Yukito from the emotion of seeing him, leaving Clen surprised, asking who she is, and he answers that she comes from the same country he has come from. At a nearby table, Roy falls in love with Mitama when he sees her, but Mitama rejects him. Minutes later Yukito and Mitama talk, and he asks her what kind of miracles or divine powers she has. She answers that she can do anything because she is a powerful goddess. Then she is glad to have been in her father's sect. After that she tries to show him her powers, and after making a magical movement, they actually end up spilling alcohol on Roy's face, who was lying on the floor. Then Mitama discovers that her powers have diminished because she has no believers in her, so by having more believers, her powers will be greater. And she tells Yukito that it is impossible that she has 0 believers, that she should have at least one, which is him, after she saved him. Suddenly a person from the village enters, informing that the capital has begun to investigate the incident, and the rest of the people in the tavern are worried that now the soldiers will go. But Roy tells them all that they should not worry because that is what Yukito is there for. Minutes later Yukito is alone in a lake meditating, worried about what can happen. But he is interrupted by Mitama, who appears inside the lake since she was worried about him, and he answers that he is worried that they can attack and destroy the village because of him. But Mitama recommends him that he should flee from there, but he answers that he does not want to leave them escaping. However, Mitama insists that he has always made many sacrifices, and in spite of everything he has managed to continue to get ahead. Then Yukito tells him that if what he needs are believers to recover his powers, then he will create a religion and make her a goddess in that world. In another scene we see Mitama sitting on top of Roy, while he swears fidelity to her as his best servant, and she replies that in gratitude she will give him his reward. But in reality it was only a fantasy of Roy. Suddenly a whore enters the tavern, which belongs to Silleril, and when carrying her, he calls her Chilchil, asking her what she has. Following with Yukito's plan, he decides to create the religious organization Salvation Thanks to Mitama, where he will be responsible for spreading the religion of the goddess Mitama to follow her will, and that is why he wants to have 10,000 believers before the army of the capital appears. For that, Yukito explains that the best way to attract the faithful is doing miracles, but as she does not have powers for that, then he must give speeches, and he has experience of what he learned from his father. Mitama interrupts him, saying that in spite of not having powers, he has a lot of knowledge that he can transmit. In another place we see that Mitama is giving a speech about her knowledge, while she asks him to pray to her as a sign of faith. Then to show that she knows everything, she uses Yukido as an example, and starts to tell funny and embarrassing moments of her life. But she is interrupted by Yukido, who tells her that he will take care of it. Later in the village, Yukido prepared a kind of altar, and in company of Roy they kneel down in sign of praying. While in the superior part of the altar is Mitama. Most of the people of the village, they approach, but they do not know that they are doing them. Suddenly Yukido explains that Mitama is his goddess, and has powers that allow him to perform miracles such as resurrecting the dead, destroying armies, and knowing everything about the past, present and future. He tells them that to prove it to them he will show them a miracle of Mitama. But not having power, Yukido puts together a number using Allural as an example in a case of divination. Using logic, he leaves Allural and everyone speechless. Then Yukido uses the Barnum effect, which consists of saying something diffuse that can be applied to anything, something like horoscopes, and the person who listens to the predictions believes that everything has been correct. But Mitama interrupts him and tells Allural that according to her he is worried about his fatness, and that she has a lot of breasts. Mitama also tells her that Yukido prefers women without so many breasts, and when she tries to cut them, Yukido interrupts her, telling her that if she likes women with big breasts, I think everyone likes them. Later we see Yukido and Mitama back in the tavern, but he was frustrated that she did not serve to attract believers. But Yukido does not give up and tries to convince everyone of the miracles and the power of Mitama, but each attempt is worse than the last. All end up failing. Again frustrated, Yukido remembers his father and thinks that it is very difficult to create a religion and make others believe. Suddenly Allural enters carrying Chilchil and tells them that he thinks that his pet ate some poison. Then Yukido says that they should take it to the vet, but Siluril answers that the capital and the parliament do not help them. That's why they have no medicine or knowledge to cure it. Later that night Yukido bursts into the tavern together with Mitama, telling Siluril and Allural that he found herbs that can serve as an antidote. Minutes later, after giving her the remedy, Chichil dies, but Mitama makes use of his power, managing to revive her. Thank goodness, because surely you were going to cry with such a sad moment. Everyone rejoices, but as a result of Mitama's effort, she is aged and weakened, since she used the only power she had from the only believer who followed her, Roy. But just before she passes away, another sad moment, she magically renews her power, thanks to the fact that she has obtained 3 believers. Then in gratitude, Mitama wants to fulfill Allural's wishes, which is to revive the members of the Imperial Army that she disappeared before. Since Allural thinks that maybe they were not as bad as she thinks, but Yukido thinks it is not a good idea, since even one of them, Bertrand, is a very bloodthirsty person. But without wasting any more time, Mitama uses his power and brings them back to life. However, after the mist dissipates, Bertrand appears together with other soldiers, but by mistake Mitama changes his gender, and now he is a girl. Bertrand, who was a knight that we saw before Mitama revived him, now with a woman's body, somehow manages to escape from the village to talk to the emperor, so he tries to tell them that he is the knight Bertrand. But the thing was that the soldiers at the entrance did not believe him, despite his efforts to give him news of the isolation camp, i.e. the village where Yukido and the rest are. They end up running him out of the place. Later we see him crying alone in the forest, lamenting for what has happened to him. But suddenly Roy arrives, who doesn't want to miss the opportunity to touch the girl, who we know is actually a boy. But fortunately Yukido prevents something worse from happening. After that, Yukido tells him that the sooner he accepts that the Empire abandoned him, he can have a place to belong, and despite not wanting to accept the proposal, finally as thanks for giving him back his life, Bertrand accepts the deal. In another moment, the wild creature of the first chapter appears again, an opportunity for Mitama to gain more believers. Therefore, using his power, he makes the sword Kusanagi no Tsurugi appear. But Riki, one of the members of the village, when trying to use it, gets hurt. After that, Mitama and Yukido argue about the effectiveness of the sword. Suddenly, the knight Bertrand manages to defeat the beast using her sword, leaving the ferocious creature cut in half. And taking advantage of this, Yukido offers protection to everyone if they join his religion, mentioning that it is a group where they worship a pet. Obviously, Mitama gets upset, but Yukido tells her that if they worship the pet, then it is like they worship her. Mitama is reduced from goddess to pet, but with that idea they manage to win people over. In the tavern, Allural explains to some people that now they only serve wine to those who are believers, so if they want to drink, then they must become part of his religion, Yukito is the one with the plan to increase the number of believers. In another moment, Yukito explains to the people what a vase consists of. That allows to preserve the food, like a kind of refrigerator, and if they want it they should join too. But later we see the tired Roy, who is responsible for building the crockery, but he has not slept much and is very exhausted. Another way of attracting followers was by offering cookies. Everything has worked in their favor and now they have more than 100 believers. Yukito understood that the way to create his religion had to be seen from another perspective. Beyond devotion and faith, since there are no gods or religions, practically no miracles or blessings either, so it is better to satisfy personal needs, providing food, protection and health. After understanding how his religion works, Bertrand arrives dressed as a woman after a sequence of images where we see Bertrand as posing, returning to the present with tears in his eyes. He asks him to die again. Omitting this, Yukito asks him to know the number of soldiers of the empire. His reason is to protect the town. Then Bertrand reveals that the military power of the empire does not lie in its men, but in its main weapon. Archon's a small elite unit at the mercy of the Emperor in scales of power. It is also mentioned that there are several, and in fact one of these is approaching the village, so Yukito asks Mitama if she has the power to destroy a mountain. She answers yes, but if she considers that she needs 10,000 believers, but at the moment they only have 100. At another point, after some strange scenes, Yukito asks him the secret of his sword, and Bertrand mentions that these are given by the Emperor to those who obtain a certain level, and that he has the ability to give powers. Hours later, we see that there is an assembly in which Yukito, Glenn, and Silleril participate. He tells them that they too are the most intelligent of their religion, so Yukito explains that the village is in danger, and they must plan a way to save the people. Moving the village is not an option, and to gain power they need 10,000 faithful. Silleril tells us that for each village only 2,000 people inhabit, highlighting the fact that there are more villages with more people. But the moment is interrupted when they begin to drink. While that happens, one of the Archons called Adder is finishing with several monsters under the guidance of this called Loki, which tells him to finish with these, as they are a danger to the Empire. But this believes that only wastes time and plans to rebel, but only remains a mere assumption. Returning to Yukito, he talks to Silleril. She plays the older sister, telling him that he already did a lot for them and that his intention to help is what counts. Suddenly something made him remember his father, and that the most effective way to gain many followers is to defeat other false religions and keep their territories and therefore their followers. Moments later, Yukito tells Clem that his plan to save the village is to change the status quo of this world, and to do so he must advance the village 500 years of technological innovations. That said, a month passed and nothing happened. However, we see Bertrand dressed as a carnival Garoda, who is about to face Adder, who at first could not recognize him, but using a scanner, at the end he manages to discover his true identity, and asks him how he changed his gender, and why he was there. After that he starts the fight. But a few seconds later we see Bertrand defeated, who asks Adder to kill him, but she refuses because she must first find out why the gender change was made, so she will take him to the capital. But before leaving, Adder is shocked to see that the village has technology never seen before, controlled by humans, which makes her question what kind of isolation camp is that.